In this workshop, we're going to focus on how to add or improve the figurative language that you have in your draft. Here's the key idea. Figurative language helps communicate complex emotions or ideas. Complex means that it's made up of many different but connected parts. It's the opposite of simple or uniform or single. This is why an author uses figurative language. Remarque could have said, "The gas still creeps over the ground and sinks into all hollows. It floats into our shell hole and settles there, disgusting and terrifying." And we would have been able to imagine the gas. This what helps us imagine that the gas moves slowly along the ground, gets into all the low places in the ground, and it settles around Paul, who recognizes its danger. So we get something about the gas from this description. However, Remarque actually wrote this: "The gas still creeps over the ground and sinks into all hollows. Like a big, soft jellyfish, it floats into our shell hole and lolls there obscenely." And now we get something much more complex than just the way the gas moves. We get that the gas is silent, translucent, and hard to see, and creeps up silently on Paul like a hunting jellyfish. We get the sense that, like a jellyfish, the gas is both random in its movement, just drifting along, but also purposeful in its threat, because anything that gas touches will be killed. And then also through the comparison to a jellyfish, we get that it is poisonous and dangerous, but because it looks so soft and shapeless, it's also kind of disgusting. It doesn't look as deadly as it is. So I think you'll notice that through the comparison to a jellyfish, we get much more than the simple description of the gas. We get a very complex picture of what the gas is and how it moves and how Paul feels about it. And that's why, as an author, you want to use figurative language. Here's a weaker example from one of my students. My student is describing going into a hospital ward, and she writes, "I look around. I see all these wounded soldiers, and some have amputated legs and arms, and others have foot diseases from the mud in the trenches." Right away, you should be noticing what great historical details she has, but she has lots of opportunities to add figurative language that she hasn't used yet. You might want to use figurative language to describe a scene, or to describe how something or someone moved, or to describe an emotion through a metaphor. Based on that, I'm going to add a piece of figurative language to her description of this hospital ward. It sounds like this: "I look around. The hospital ward is a grotesque garden of broken men, varied in their faces, yet all rooted in the misery of pain and suffering. There are wounded soldiers, and some have amputated legs and arms, and others have foot diseases from the mud in the trenches." So I've added a comparison to a garden to describe this hospital ward. I made this comparison to suggest complex things. Perhaps that the soldiers are collected, like plants in a garden, in a single place and on display for the observer. The same way that a garden has a variety of plants, I thought that this hospital has a variety of soldiers with a wide variety of ailments and illnesses. And the same way that a garden grows a little bit wildly and isn't in perfect organization, I compared it to a garden to suggest that the soldiers are spread about the room in relative disorder. Again, using figurative language conveys a more complex picture than a simple description. I also used diction to enhance my figurative language as I wrote this comparison. You might have noticed the word grotesque, which means odd or unnatural or distorted in shape. I also used the word rooted. Rooted relates to gardens and the soldiers as plants growing in that garden, and it suggests their inability to leave that hospital ward. Another way that figurative language might be weaker and need revision is if it doesn't match the tone. Remember that you can use figurative language to describe a scene, or how something or someone moved, or to describe an emotion through a metaphor. However, the tone of the metaphor that you create should match the tone of the scene. Here's an example where I think this could be better. The writer writes, "As we walked to the hospital, it was silent between us. I read a sign that read, 'Urgent care, back right.' The air was cool. The breeze hit me like a ray of sunshine, although I was sick to my stomach. I walk through the doors. All I can hear is screaming, and I see pain and suffering from every corner." I noticed right away that the tone of this passage was pretty depressing and uncomfortable, but a breeze hitting me like a ray of sunshine seemed pretty happy, so it seemed like there was a mismatch between the figurative language and the tone of the rest of the passage. So I'm going to change the simile from the breeze being like a ray of sunshine to the breeze being like a lump of ice, and now it sounds like this. As we walked to the hospital, it was silent between us. I read a sign that read, "Urgent care, back right." The air was cool. The breeze numbed me like a lump of ice, although I was sick to my stomach. I walk through the doors. All I can hear is screaming, and I see pain and suffering from every corner. So you'll notice that the tone throughout this passage is tense and uncomfortable, and this simile matches that tone better than the former comparison. To improve your draft, there's a few things you can do. You can work on adding figurative language. Remember that you can use that to describe a scene, to describe motion or movement, or to highlight an emotion. You can also revise the figurative language that you already have to make it stronger. Remember that comparisons and similes or metaphors should be to unique or surprising things. You don't want to compare fog to a cloud, but you might compare fog to wool, or fog to yarn, or fog to oatmeal would be more interesting. And the figurative language should reinforce or add to the tone of the rest of the story, so make sure it matches and creates the tone that you're trying to set as the author.